She was already on the phone screaming, 911, he's trespassing. When my moving truck stopped, I hadn't even stepped down yet. Boxes still inside. My kids still in the car. She marched up, waving a paper in my face, saying the HOA had voted me out before I arrived. She ordered the movers to stop and told my wife we had 10 minutes to leave or would be arrested. I stayed quiet, just watched her talk like she owned the air. Then she slapped a red sticker on my door and whispered, "You people never read the rules." The street went silent when sirens turned the corner. She smiled like she'd already won, not knowing the call she made was about to expose the biggest mistake of her life. The police cars stopped right in front of our truck. She rushed to them first, pointing at me like I was some criminal, yelling that I broke HOA rules and forged documents to move in. She even said my kids were part of the scam. One officer looked at me and asked for my ID. I handed it over calmly. She laughed and told everyone on the street to record, because this deadbeat is getting removed today. Then she pulled out a folder and said she had proof the HOA owned the road, the sidewalks, everything. The officer asked one simple question. Who told you that?" She said my name like it was poison. And that's when the second officer slowly looked at me again, his face changing, because my last name sounded very familiar to him. He asked me quietly if I was related to the name on the street sign at the corner. Karen cut in fast, saying street names mean nothing and that HOA law beats old paperwork. I didn't answer her. I just nodded at the officer. He stepped back, made a call, and asked everyone to wait. Karen started pacing, telling neighbors how she saved this community and how people like me always try tricks. Then the tow truck she secretly called pulled in behind our moving truck. She smiled again and told the driver to hook us up. That's when the officer raised his hand and said, "Do not touch that truck." Her smile froze. She asked him if he was refusing an HOA order. He replied, "No, I'm protecting private property until ownership is confirmed." The word ownership hit her hard, but she still had no idea how deep that word was about to cut. She snapped and said she didn't need confirmation, because she was the HOA president. She tried to grab the officer's arm and pointed at my wife, saying she was scared for the children and wanted them removed for safety. My wife held our youngest tighter. I could feel the street watching now. Phones up, curtains moving. The officer warned her to step back. Instead, she pulled out her phone and played a voice note, claiming it was from the city saying the HOA controlled all deeds on this block. The officer listened for 3 seconds, then shook his head. He said the call was fake and asked her where she got it. She said she handled things for the neighborhood. That's when a black SUV stopped at the end of the street. A man in a suit stepped out holding a thick folder. He walked straight past Karen and said my full name out loud. And the way he said it made the air feel heavy. Karen laughed and said, "Great, another actor." The man didn't look at her. He shook my hand and handed the folder to the officer. Inside were stamp deeds, city maps, and a transfer dated years ago. The officer's eyes moved fast, then slower. Then he looked up and asked me why I didn't say anything earlier. I told him I wanted to see how far she'd go. Karen stepped closer, trying to read the pages, her voice cracking as she said the HOA had an agreement. The man in the suit finally spoke and said the HOA agreement was void, because the entire street, from curb to curb, had been sold to a private trust. He paused, then added, "Owned by him." Karen's face went pale. She shouted that it was impossible and demanded someone arrest us for fraud. That's when the officer told her to lower her voice, because she was now the one standing on property she didn't own. She stepped back fast, then stopped, realizing there was nowhere she could step without being on my land. The officer asked her for ID now. Her tone changed, softer, saying she was just doing her job and protecting the community. The officer reminded her she filed a false 911 call and tried to tow a truck without legal right. She started blaming the HOA board, saying they told her to do it. That's when one of the neighbors spoke up and said she'd been fining people for years and keeping the money. Another neighbor said she locked his garage last winter. Phones were still recording. Karen looked around, searching for support, but nobody spoke for her. The officer asked her one last time if she wanted to change her statement. She shook her head and said, "I have authority here." The officer sighed and said, "Not anymore." Then he turned her around and put the cuffs on, and the sound of them clicking was louder than the sirens. As they walked her to the car, she kept yelling that the HOA would sue me, that I'd regret this. I didn't say a word. I just looked at my kids, still sitting quietly, watching everything. The officer came back and apologized to my wife for the scare. He told the movers they could unload. The man in the suit leaned close and said the trust paperwork would be public by morning. Every fine she ever gave would be reviewed. Every fake notice would be void. One neighbor shook my hand and said, "So this is your street?" I smiled and said, "Always was." The sun hit the houses just right as the police car drove away. And for the first time that day, the street felt calm, because everyone finally knew who really owned it. That night, when the boxes were finally inside and the kids were asleep, I stood at the end of the street and looked down the road with the lights on. Same houses, same people, but everything felt different. No fake rules, no fear, just quiet. The next morning, the HOA board resigned before noon. The signs came down. The fines were erased. One officer drove by, slowed down, and nodded at me. I nodded back. I didn't buy this street to control anyone. I bought it so no one like her could ever control us again. And as I locked my front door, one thought stayed with me. In this country, land still means freedom, but only if you know your rights. End the story.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing HOA stories.